Have you ever thought about switching careers, having maybe a non-linear career? Well, today on this episode of our Adult Gap Year podcast series, Carli Fink is going to share tons of information about what it means to have a non-linear career and how to step into that strategically if you feel that it might be time for a shift for you. Take a listen. Welcome to the Gap Year podcast, where we explore the who, what, where, when, and why of gap years. It's real people sharing their stories, ideas, and experts diving deep into how you can make the right decisions in order to have a meaningful gap year. This is the place to be no matter where you are on your gap year journey. I'm Michelle Dittmer, your resident gap year expert. Let's jump right in. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Gap Year podcast. My name is Michelle Dittmer, and I am your host and gap year expert. Today, we are focusing on adult gap years. So if you are a young person, you can imagine yourself in the future. If you are a mid to older adult, we've got other conversations for you today. And I've brought on an amazing guest today. I've got Carli Fink here. She is going to share so much information with us on career trajectories and how do we make decisions around our career and where it's going. All sorts of great content for you today. But first of all, welcome, Carli. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, about your career, maybe about your organization that you are currently running. So tell us, who is Carli? Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, that's a big question, and I know our time is limited today, so I'll try to keep it brief. But my name's Carli. I am a certified career development practitioner, and as Michelle was alluding to, I have a portfolio career right now, which means I do a few different things. So I work part-time for a consulting company, I teach classes on careers at a university, and then I also have my own career counseling practice. And that's called Foreseeable Futures. And through Foreseeable Futures, I mainly work with people who either have or want to have a non-linear career. And I myself have had a very non-linear career. I won't take you through it all now, but I'm sure I'll touch on pieces of it throughout today. So in short, I'm trained as a K to 12 teacher, not every grade, but I'm trained to teach within that age range. But I never wanted to be a teacher. I went on to work in student life programming kind of roles, and then academic advising, and then career counseling, and then workforce development, and now workforce consulting. And it's all been great, but it's definitely been not a straightforward journey.
Well, and I'm a huge fan of nonlinear journeys as well.
Me too.
And similar to you, I've been all over the place. I was trained as a scientist and then a teacher, and I worked
I
in
don't even think
outdoor
I knew you were trained as a
education.
scientist. That's awesome.
Yeah, biology, chemistry.
Very cool.
Yeah, fun fact. And so like these nonlinear careers, I know for me have really allowed me to go on a journey of self-discovery, but also leaning into different opportunities as they presented themselves and not
Hmm.
necessarily saying, no, I was trained as X, therefore I must be X,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
feeling disappointed if I wasn't X. And I think that in 2026, we still hear this story from our time in high school, from our parents, from previous generations who maybe did have a singular career from the time that they graduated through to retirement. And so this fantasy of a linear career, this fantasy of a single occupation or job for your entire life is still idealized to a certain extent. So I'm wondering, why do you think in 2026 do people still think this is a good thing, or is it a good thing?
It's a good question, and I think we're seeing lots of people who still think it's a good thing, but I'm also hearing more and more from people who realize that it's not the norm, it's not the only way, and they're very open to and even interested in a non-linear career. But to answer your question about why it's still idealized, I think that kind of operates at two levels. One is the individual level. I think for most people, it's just a sense of safety and security and stability that, I'm going to pick one thing and hopefully it's a stable thing and hopefully I get into a good employer early on in my career and then I'm just set, basically. I think a lot of people like the idea that, you work hard early on and hopefully you get rewarded for that in the long term. And it can certainly still work that way, linear or non-linear career. But the idea being that once you're in a career, you just get to show up and be good at your job and let the work speak for itself. And you don't necessarily have to work so hard at like managing your career as much as just doing your job. And I think there's a lot of appeal to that because it helps us orient our lives and plan our lives. It gives us a sense of direction and structure and financial stability and even community at work. And at the same time, I think it operates on a societal level too, where society uh, looks at that as being like the dream, as being the gold standard that we should all aspire to. And I want to highlight that even though you said, yes, this used to be more common in the past and people still fantasize about it, it was never as if 100% of the workforce had these kinds of careers. There were always people who did things that weren't necessarily choosing one thing when they were young, sticking with it forever, working full time through their entire career for so many different reasons. So I think now we're seeing that population who's having nonlinear careers grow, but I want to emphasize that it didn't start from like zero.
And I think, as with everything, social media plays into this as well because we're hearing more stories
Hmm.
than we've
Oh yeah, for
ever
sure.
heard before. And so we are seeing more people just talk about their journeys, and what that has looked like for them. So I think,
Hmm.
it's really great to hear you talk about it from both perspectives. And I
Thanks.
think that that security in 2026, especially where the world feels a little chaotic, that idea of
A little.
stability and that you've put in years of study for something, you've put in years of training for something, and so this should be your path forward. But there's lots of benefits to switching careers and changing trajectories and going
Hmm.
in a different direction. So I'm wondering, in your experience and the folks that you've worked with, your expertise, what are some of the concrete benefits of being diverse in your career or changing pathways, as you're navigating?
Okay, so it's a great question, and I have a couple different answers. I feel like I should think through them and have a way of organizing them, but right now I don't, so I'm just going to share two off the top of my head. One is frankly just personal fulfillment and being able to meet different needs that you may have throughout your lifespan. So the idea that we choose one career when we're 18 or 21 or 25 and stick with it forever really doesn't accommodate for the reality that our lives change as we go through life. And not everyone's lives change in the same way. There are certain themes that may come up for people at different ages and stages of life, but it's not as if everyone goes through the exact same trajectory. So sometimes a career that worked for you at 25 or 31 or 42 doesn't work for you anymore at a certain point later in your life. And that doesn't mean you're a failure. And it's great to have other options to be able to transition into to get those needs met. So you can certainly grieve what may have come before or what you're not able to do anymore or what's not working for you, while also still acknowledging that, hey, isn't it great that right now I'm actually able to make transitions that are going to help me lead the kind of life I want and need to leave for who I am now at age 47 or 52 or 38 or whatever it may be. So that's one reason why, or that's like one benefit. And I think the other benefit that we're seeing a lot more of in 2026, especially due to some of the chaos in the world, is that it actually makes you more adaptable and more resilient to labor market shocks. So, this idea that you built a career at one company in one function and doing one thing forever was great when the economy was more stable. But now that the economy is less stable, what I'm seeing a lot of is people who have those kinds of careers being in a real state of shock if they lose their job and not necessarily being as prepared to adapt to other functions or other industries or even job search methods. Like I've worked with people now who have gotten out of jobs that they've been in for 20, 25 years. The last time they job searched, the internet was like in its infancy. And now when they're thinking about researching new career paths and applying to jobs, they don't even know where to start because they've only been an internal candidate. And sure, yes, they use the internet, of course, but the idea that you may actually be at a disadvantage in some ways if you're only on one narrow path is a really new way of thinking about things. But in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years, I guess, like since the pandemic started, we've seen a lot of ups and downs in a lot of different industries. And we've seen many employers, not all employers, of course, but many employers reduce some of the rewards for long-term loyalty for employees. And so the incentives for employees to stay at one company or even in one industry long term aren't always what they used to be. And that opens up these opportunities for people to make transitions. And what we're seeing is in these times with the economy being less stable, people who have made those transitions effectively and understand what's required in multiple different functions or who have the skills to succeed in different functions and who can translate their experiences from one industry to another and who know how to job search effectively are actually finding jobs quickly. And those who are not able to adapt are having trouble adapting.
And because I work in the world of young people a lot, it's funny when we think of the advice we give our young people. Keep all your doors open, try lots of
Mm,
things, diversify your experience, double down on those transferable skills. Those are the things that we tell our young people who are starting their career. But that piece of advice translates throughout your career as well, because what's going to help you find that initial position and find your initial area of interest can also support you later if you are making other transitions in life too.
mm.
So keeping that perspective and treating yourself like a young person and saying, am I doubling down on all those transferable skills? Can I speak to that? And how do I keep doors open and get exposure in various areas so that I am a little bit more able to step into multiple roles in the future.
Absolutely. And I really like that point you raise about treating yourself like a young person. I think that has value in so many ways. But one thing I want to pull out from that is actually the idea that most people are a lot sort of younger in their career than they realize. Like working lives are getting longer and longer, in part because our lifespans have gotten longer over time, and in part because the cost of living, especially in Canada, has gone up so significantly in recent years that a lot of people are not able to fully retire at the time they might have initially expected to retire. And so I work with a lot of people who are in their 30s, let's say, even their late 30s, asking the question of, is it too late to make a change in their career? And I often highlight that if you're in your late 30s, you may have at least another 30 years of working life ahead. Like many people now are working into their 70s, occasionally even their 80s. And I'm not saying that's the norm or something we should aspire to. Everyone has their own goals and everyone has their unique financial situation and the ways in which they want to contribute to society through work. But I will say that for a lot of people, if they are in their late 30s, they've maybe been in the workforce for like 20 years max, but they likely still have more than 20 years ahead. And so when it comes to the world of work, you're like basically a teenager. You haven't even entered the adult chapter of your working life. And I think that's a real reframe for a lot of people. And it's hard to imagine when society as a whole doesn't do a great job of talking about career changes within adulthood.
Yeah. Oh, I love that messaging. And I really
Thanks.
it's really so important. And I know I even see it in myself. And I was out shopping and I found a little sticker and it says, dreams don't have deadlines.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I bought it because it really resonated with me in this idea that if you have something you want to achieve in life and you haven't achieved it by 30, by 40, by 50, by 60. There is still plenty of time to make those
Hmm.
things happen. And sometimes we just feel, well, it's too late, and we give up before we even make an effort to move forward. Whether you want to start law school at 40 or you want
Hmm.
to
People do it. You laugh, but
become an
it's not
entrepreneur.
uncommon. It's sorry, it's not common, but it's not unheard of.
Yeah.
People do start law school at 40. People start businesses in their 50s. Like it is totally possible. Can
Yeah.
it be more challenging than doing it when you're young? Quite possibly. And in some cases more than others. But yeah, it is possible.
Yeah. And you're also bringing your wisdom with you. And I think that that
Absolutely.
has a lot of value. I think of myself at 20 and the way I would have
God, yeah.
approached starting a business at 20, and just the lack of life experience would
Oh yeah.
turn out very different than if now at 43, I was like, hey, I'm going to start a business. I'm bringing all of this stuff, all of these things that I've learned over the years, and I'm going to apply it into this new realm. I think it would be a completely different outcome, completely different experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I only started my small business about 2 years ago. And in some ways, I wish I had started it earlier because I'm really enjoying the process of building it so far. And on the other hand, I think back to who I was at 20 or 25 or 29 and knew like I couldn't have started it earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. So embrace the wisdom, I guess, is the underlying story there.
Hmm.
I'm curious about for folks who are listening and they're like, I don't know if it's time to make a transition.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm scared. Maybe I'm dissatisfied with the type of work that I'm doing. How might somebody identify that it would be a good time to start considering or start taking action on pivoting in their career and moving into a different area?
It's a great question. In a way, I wish I like had a specific email up that I wrote a few weeks ago because somebody asked me and I literally broke it down. Like, here are some signs of yes, and here are some signs of maybe not yet. So I'm not remembering all of those right now, but I think a few core themes would be if you are feeling like you leave work more often than not, feeling really drained, depleted, exhausted, more than you feel energized or excited or even neutral. If you are looking at what's going on in your role, in your company, in your industry, and thinking this isn't just symptomatic of like the current moment, like, sure, maybe it's a particularly busy season, or maybe it's a tough season for the business or for the industry in some way. But if you're noticing things that are like systematic conditions, like I have a couple clients right now who are teachers, and they are feeling like they're just so overstimulated in the classroom. And there could be schools they might work at where that would be easier to navigate. And there are schools where that would be harder to navigate. But there are certain conditions of the industry as a whole that mean, depending on how they're feeling about the level of stimulation and number of kids in a classroom and the expectations of what they're expected to do as a teacher, is just really overwhelming, and that's not likely to go away or fundamentally change because a it's like a it's part of the structure of the profession right now. So that's another thing. Um, Another thing I might say is if you're just really feeling like disengaged from your work. There's one thing to be said about having like personal boundaries and not necessarily taking everything that happens at work so personally. And obviously, some level of boundaries is very healthy and necessary for work to be sustainable. But for for someone who feels like they're really disengaged from work or kind of just going through the motions, and especially if that's been happening for an extended period of time, that could be a signal to start listening to and consider what else you may want to do that gets you feeling a little more engaged, a little more excited, because those things are good for you as a person and they also help you perform better in your job. Um, and then the one thing that I want to really break down maybe about changing careers is that it doesn't have to be like an absolute, I'm never doing anything to change careers. I'm just feeling disappointed or disengaged or stuck or frustrated with my job. And then all of a sudden, one day I decide I'm going to change, and now I'm going full speed ahead on making a change. I want to normalize the idea that you can actually do certain things, even while you might be still considering a change, to set yourself up for success and explore new paths without leaving the current path you're on.
I think that's so huge, because like you said, like sometimes it's just seasonal and the
Hmm.
dissatisfaction or this itch for change could be scratched in a different way without
Hmm.
disrupting your income, without disrupting some of that stability that you may need for other reasons in your life.
Hmm.
And you want to make sure that when you are making that step forward, that you're doing it intelligently. You're not having that knee-jerk reaction. Like this job
Hmm.
sucks. I quit today. I'll find something different tomorrow. That's going to be the best job ever. I think we have to
Hmm.
take our careers seriously enough to realize that it is going to have implications on a ripple effect on the rest of our lives. And so I'm curious from your expertise and how you advise folks, how do you do that strategically? What are the
Hmm.
steps or what are the things that you could do to make that transition a little bit easier, and do it like quote unquote properly? There is no formula, there is no way because everybody's situation is different.
Yeah, I mean, there's no formula, but there are like best practices I might recommend.
Yeah, what are those best practices? Share with the class.
Okay, so a few are, first of all, try to diagnose the problem correctly. So, for example, if you are really struggling in your current career, if you're feeling disengaged or frustrated or drained or burnt out, like what are the specific aspects of your work life that are causing that to happen? And that might require you to actually start paying attention and like tracking things a little bit more. So, do these feelings tend to come up when you're working on certain types of tasks? Do these feelings tend to come up when you're asked to do certain behaviors, like stay at work later than you've expected? Do these feelings tend to come up more when you know that you'll be meeting or working with certain people within your organization? Like, what is the actual problem? Because it's hard to fix the problem either within your current organization or on your current path, or by finding a new path. It's really hard to fix it if you don't know what it is. And there are a lot of people I've worked with over the years who have made changes based on basically the incorrect diagnosis, or thought like, oh, I'm just frustrated with my career, so I've got to do something different, and then find that it's not any better. Or sometimes it's better in certain ways and worse in other ways, and it might not be the trade-off they were hoping for or one that they're willing to accept. So, really diagnosing the issue correctly in the first place is like a great foundation. And then beyond that, I would say start trying things out in low cost, low risk ways before you actually make a full transition. So that could look like talking to people who work in the field or fields that you're considering switching into, and asking really pointed, targeted questions to draw out relevant information that's going to help you decide, is this the right next step for me? That could also look like reading online or listening to podcasts from people who work in those fields. There is such an abundance of information out there these days about careers, and often even about specific employers, to help you learn if that's actually where you want to be in your next step. And then for some people, particularly if they're looking to make a bigger pivot into something where they don't necessarily have all the relevant skills or experiences to land their dream job in the new field right now, that might actually have to look like some more hands-on work. So for some people, that will involve going back to school in some way, taking some kind of course, building a skill. For other people, that will look like volunteering in a relevant field or doing a personal project to demonstrate that they actually have the competencies to succeed in the new function they want to be in. And so it could look like a lot of different things. That's just a sample, but those are sort of two of the best practices that I would recommend: diagnosing the problem correctly, and then prototyping or trying things out before you actually jump in a big way.
I love that. And it's such a great case for an adult gap year. Funny that. Because really, sometimes when you are
Yeah, absolutely. Like an adult gap year is a way to prototype things.
exactly, because when you're employed full time and you've got a family and you have all these things, sometimes the capacity to take those courses, the
Hmm.
capacity to work on a project that could help your career,
Hmm.
just isn't there. It's not available to us because of the other things in life. And so, like, point check for this adult gap year or this kind of extended leave for those who are able to. You could use that time really effectively to explore different careers, explore different options, develop the competencies, test things out and see, hey, do I actually like that? And find those opportunities to set yourself up for success in whatever that next chapter is. And you may return back to your former employer. You may return to your former employer, but with a plan of what that exit might look like. You might find that there is something that you're passionate about and skilled at, and opportunities already there, and you may transition at that point. But sometimes we need a little bit more time and space for that exploration to happen. So if your organization has some sort of extended leave plan, a sabbatical, some sort of opportunity like that, then lean into that if you can, and use that as an opportunity to do a little self exploration and to develop yourself and to figure out what other options might be for you.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Ah.
With that shameless plug for adult gap years behind us, you have been such a valuable resource for the folks listening to this podcast. And maybe
Oh, thank
if
you.
they want a little bit of additional support, they need some of your wisdom, some of your guidance, your expertise, where can they find you? How can they get in touch with you?
Great question. So I have a website and I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is just my name, Carli Fink, and my website is foreseeablefutures.ca.
Amazing. And we will link all of that in the show notes for you so you can just click away and get in touch with Carli. Carli, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today and sharing all of your expertise. It's been such a joy to learn about nonlinear careers, and as two people who've lived and breathed it and are surviving and thriving, it is just something so good to put out there into the world. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Amazing. And to all of our listeners, we will see you next time. We've got a whole series coming up on adult gap years and what that looks like. How do you do it? So make sure you listen to the entire series. Thanks so much, friends. And until next time, keep on adventuring.